It is an unusual time for Premier League clubs, as it is for teams further down the footballing pyramid and across the globe. As we move into April, typically it would be a case of full steam ahead in terms of relegation battles, title races, cup finals and beyond. This season is obviously an anomaly in that respect, since at the time of this recording at least, we do not know when football will return, in what capacity it will return, and how contentious decisions regarding league finishes will be decided should the remaining fixtures be unable to be completed. As such, clubs remain largely in limbo, but one area financially stable Premier League clubs are fortunate enough to still be able to focus their attention on is transfer activity. Nowadays, the hunt for players is a 24 hours a day, 365 days a year operation, with work constantly being done behind the scenes to identify transfer targets, prioritise them, and ultimately negotiate deals to sign them. I've had a few requests to take a look at every Premier League team's weakest position, which is naturally pretty similar to the area in which every Premier League team needs to strengthen, and today, that's what I'm going to do. Here is every Premier League team's weakest position / the area they need to strengthen. Arsenal. Centre back. Arsenal had actually been in pretty fine form in the build-up to the Premier League suspension, although their impressive results were slightly subdued by elimination at the hands of Olympiacos in the Europa League. The world is currently facing a very serious global pandemic, and you probably have to go back to the last major SARS outbreak in the early to mid-2000s for the last time Arsenal had a truly world-class centre-back partnership. It seems like we've been saying that Arsenal need a quality centre-back for as long as time itself, but still we wait for it to happen. The Gunners sign a new centre-back every season, but never quite seem to push the boat out and bring in a real class act like Van Dijk or Laporte. Arsenal's most frequent centre-back duo this season has been David Luiz and Socrates. Socrates loves a battle but isn't the most intricate, and whilst Luiz can be excellent for 89 minutes, we all know he possesses that split second of madness. Top class centre-backs aren't easy to come by, but finally finding one surely has to be Mikel Arteta's priority in the summer. Aston Villa. Centre forward. I'm just going to throw it out there that if your top scoring centre forward has only scored 5 Premier League goals this season, there's a decent chance I'm going to say that you need a new striker. That is the case at Aston Villa, where midfielders Jack Grealish, Conor Hurricane and Anwar El Ghazi have all outscored leading striker Wesley so far this season. Villa did have a prolific marksman last season, and if they'd had Tammy Abraham on loan again this season, their league position might look a little bit more promising. As things stand, Villa sits second from bottom. Should Dean Smith's men go down, Wesley or Mbwana Samatta might be able to find their feet in the English game, but if the club retains their Premier League status, they need someone who can put the ball in the back of the net right now. Bournemouth. Central midfield. Victims of their own success in so many respects, there was always going to be a sticky season for Bournemouth following their meteoric rise, and that season is upon us. The Cherries have had problems right across the park this season, and I think defensive reinforcements are a must should the club still be in the Premier League next season. Whether they stay up or go down though, I think Eddie Howe's men are lacking something in central midfield. It's the one position that Bournemouth don't seem to have had an injury crisis in this season, but whenever I watch the Cherries, I just think they're crying out for someone who can grab the game by the scruff of the neck in central midfield. Neither Philip Billing nor Jefferson Lerma, who are both talented footballers, appear to be that man, and nor is Lewis Cook. Brighton. Holding midfield. I think Brighton could do with some reinforcements in the fullback positions, but their weakest position in my opinion is in defensive or holding midfield. Berham Kayal and Dale Stephens can both play in a deeper midfield role, but both are stronger in central midfield, and Kayal hasn't even played a game for the Seagulls this season. Graham Potter isn't so ill-equipped in central midfield, but a proper defensive midfield would add real balance and steel to the Brighton side. Burnley. Central / attacking midfield. Whether the Premier League can be resumed or not, Burnley will retain their Premier League status once again this season, sitting just 1 point behind Arsenal and 2 behind Tottenham when the league was suspended. Despite having a fairly small squad, Sean Dyche does have decent balance among the players he's got at Turf Moor. One area in which I think the Clarets could improve is in terms of a real creative playmaker or attacking midfielder who can run at players or open up a defence. Either dropping Jay Rodriguez back into a number 10 role or pushing Jeff Hendrick forward is the closest the Clarets come to a player like that, and it isn't a natural position for either of them. Chelsea. Left back. I've no doubt that there are 3 positions in particular Frank Lampard will be keen to strengthen at Chelsea in the summer: left back, centre back and centre forward. The Blues have options at centre-back, but the likes of Tamori Zuma and Christensen are yet to really stamp down a definitive place in Lampard's starting 11. Meanwhile, Antonio Rudiger has missed large spells of this season through injury. Up top, Lampard may place his trust in Tammy Abraham, but even so, he will need fresh backup options with Olivier Giroud and Michy Batshuayi seemingly likely to leave the club. The biggest problem position at Stamford Bridge, though, for a while now, has been at left back. Marcus Alonso and Emerson have been rotated there this season, but neither have played with real authority. Frank Lampard was used to having Ashley Cole alongside him at left back during his time at Chelsea, and I suspect he'll be keen to add someone with that kind of solidity at left back this summer. Crystal Palace. Centre forward. Centre forward has been a problem position for Crystal Palace ever since Christian Benteke forgot what a goal looked like, and the big Belgian has scored just once in all competitions this season. Fellow striker Jordan Ayew tops the Eagles scoring charts with 8 goals, which isn't actually that bad, given that he had only scored 9 Premier League goals in 70 games in the previous 3 seasons. Personally, I still think Palace needs someone better than Ayew, or at least someone to compete with him who has a better goal-scoring record than Benteke in recent years. Roy Hodgson's men were sitting pretty in 11th place when the Premier League season was suspended, but only Norwich and Newcastle have scored fewer goals than them this season. Everton. Central midfield. Until recently, I might have been tempted to say centre forward for Everton, but given the form of Dominic Calvert-Lewin since Carlo Ancelotti came in, one would be surprised if the Toffees prioritised the position going into the summer window. It is more likely, I would suggest, that the experienced Italian will focus his attention on central midfield. I'm not convinced holding midfielder Morgan Schneiderlin is up to the job anymore. Fabian Delph has been underwhelming since his arrival from Man City, Andre Gomes has suffered a significant injury setback, and Tom Davies is still only 21. In truth, Everton could probably do with a couple of additions in the middle of the park, a replacement for Schneiderlin who can break up play, and someone who can come in and pick passes, dictate the rhythm of a game, and add some creativity. Leicester City. Centre forward. An excellent season for Leicester City was just starting to peter out before the Premier League season was suspended, with supporters just keeping one eye over their shoulder and worrying about retaining a Champions League spot. It's no surprise that the Foxes' drop-off in form arrived when Jamie Vardy was sidelined, and Brendan Rodgers has no true rival for the Premier League's top scorer at his disposal. Kelechi Iheanacho hasn't been useless when called upon, but he's simply nowhere near as prolific as Vardy. The Foxes could do with a real quality winger as well, but primarily, I think they need someone who can compete with and offer backup to Jamie Vardy, and long-term, possibly replace the Englishman, who we can't forget is 33 years of age. Liverpool. Goalkeeper. Clearly, Liverpool have been so brilliant in the Premier League this season that some people might argue they don't have a weak position or anywhere that they desperately need to improve. That may be true in terms of Jurgen Klopp's starting 11, but there are a few positions where I think they lack a bit of depth. Liverpool's Champions League defeat to Atletico Madrid brutally exposed the difference in ability between Alisson and Adrian, and whilst Liverpool are never realistically going to find a backup keeper of similar ability to their Brazilian number 1, most of the teams around them do have a stronger number 2. I think the Reds would also be in a touch of bother if anything were to happen to either Andy Robertson or Trent Alexander-Arnold, who is so crucial to the way in which the team plays. The likes of Nathaniel Klein and James Milner could operate as makeshift fullbacks, as well as Joe Gomez, but none of them would offer the expansion or invention of Liverpool's 2 chief creators. A couple of talented fullbacks and a half-decent backup goalkeeper would really add to the Premier League tabletoppers' ranks. Manchester City. Centre-back. Even the indigenous Sentinelese people of the North Sentinel Islands in the Bay of Bengal off India, who have lived uncontacted for 60,000 years, are well aware that Manchester City are desperately in need of a new centre-back. The Citizens lost their captain Vincent Kompany last summer, but despite usually being so free spending in the transfer market, they did not bring in a central defensive reinforcement. Aymeric Laporte is a class act, and he is so good that he typically makes his centre-back partner look competent, but in his absence, the Man City defence often looks all at sea. Fernandinho has spent most of the season playing at centre-back, often preferred to John Stones or Nicolas Otamendi, who Pep Guardiola doesn't seem to trust as a partnership. I've no doubt Man City will go hard in the transfer market in search of a quality partner for Laporte, setting their sights high perhaps on the likes of Ruben Dias at Benfica or Milan Skriniar at Inter Milan. Manchester United. Defensive midfield. In my humble opinion, there are a couple of positions in which Manchester United could really do with a proper world-class signing. One of those is on the right flank to partner Martial and Rashford in their front 3. That may seem harsh on Dan James, who has had an admirable first season, but I just think United's youthful front 3 could do with a Mane, Salah or Sterling type of established threat on the right flank, although finding one is easier said than done. I'd probably say defensive midfield is the Red Devils' weakest position right now though. Since the arrival of Bruno Fernandes, United's midfield ranks have improved immeasurably, and Fred has started playing his best football in a United shirt. Nemanja Matic has put in some decent performances, but I just feel as though the 31-year-old sometimes looks a little slow and laborious these days. There are plenty of better, more combative, and more gifted holding players out there, and I'd be surprised if Ole Gunnar Solskjaer wasn't on the lookout for one. Newcastle United, centre forward. I mean, this one should go without saying. I said if your centre forward has only scored 5 league goals in a season, then you've got a problem, and the same is true if they've only scored 1. That is the case with Joelinton this season, who has been outscored by no fewer than 5 Newcastle defenders in the Premier League this season. Steve Bruce has long lived by the mantra that a team is only as good as their centre forwards, and following that logic, Newcastle must be absolutely useless. There's no doubt in my mind that Brucey will be looking at strikers in the summer, probably 2 in fact, most likely one who has something akin to a proven record in the Premier League, and one who is a bit more of an unknown quantity. Norwich City, centre-back. When Norwich City started the season away at Liverpool with Grant Hanley starting at centre-back, I must admit I worried for them. 7 minutes in, he'd scored an own goal, and the Canaries currently found themselves bottom of the Premier League table. There are a few areas where Daniel Farke would no doubt have loved to have improved coming into this season, attacking midfield being another one, but you always face an uphill task as a promoted club if you can't keep clean sheets. That's why Norwich and Aston Villa, the 2 teams with the worst defensive records in the Premier League, are 19th and 20th, meanwhile Sheffield United are up in 7th. Even if the Canaries do go down, I think they'd be well advised to add a decent centre-back to their ranks. Sheffield United, goalkeeper. Okay, let me just explain. This is the only one where there is a real difference between whether this video is about each team's weakest position or where they need to strengthen. Clearly, goalkeeper isn't Sheffield United's weakest position right now. Dean Henderson has been excellent for the last 2 seasons, but the England international is only on loan at Bramall Lane from Manchester United. With reports of the Red Devils offering him a new £100,000 a week deal and Chelsea bidding £50 million for him, it seems increasingly unlikely that Chris Wilder will be able to keep hold of his prize number 1 beyond this summer. As such, they will desperately need to find a goalkeeper. Elsewhere, I'd expect the Blades to bring in another centre forward as well. Southampton, centre-back. Without the goals of Danny Ings this season, Southampton would be in a real mess. The Saints have conceded 52 goals so far this term, the same number as Norwich City, and only Aston Villa have conceded more. The Saints have decent depth between the sticks and at fullback, but they look noticeably weak at centre-back. Jan Bednarak has shone at times since being handed his chance by Ralph Hasenhüttl, but 6'6" Yannick Vestergaard has played just 1 game since the Saints boss denied him a move to Leicester City, and whilst Mai Yoshida has been a fantastic servant at St Mary's, he can look a little lightweight. No team could easily recover from the sale of Virgil van Dijk, but Southampton are still reeling from the Dutchman's departure, and they desperately need to find a really quality centre-back. Tottenham, centre-forward. Watching Tottenham in the last few weeks prior to the Premier League suspension, you could be forgiven for thinking that they need to strengthen in every position. Jose Mourinho will be asking for cash to spend this summer, no doubt, as well as praying that he can keep hold of his most prized assets. Harry Kane is Tottenham's star man, but whether or not the club sells him, they urgently need a new striker. Having lost Fernando Llorente last summer, Tottenham really do not have any serious backup to Kane. Son Heung-min has tended to play through the middle in Kane's absence, but he does his best work out wide. Then you have Irishman Troy Parrott, who only recently turned 18 and certainly isn't yet ready to give competition to Kane when fit. Tottenham have a real problem in as much as Harry Kane has sustained a number of injuries in recent seasons, and that's likely to be partly down to the lack of cover for him, meaning he has to play virtually every minute of every game when he's fit. Tottenham need a good, hungry young striker who can be rotated for Kane when fit and cover as a replacement for him when Kane is sidelined. Watford, centre-forward. Watford have a couple of really dangerous wide men and some excellent central midfielders, but they lack a quality marksman. Troy Deeney is the Hornets' top scorer in the Premier League this season with 5 goals, meanwhile his strike partner Andre Gray has only managed 2. Nigel Pearson also has Danny Welbeck on his books, but if they're banking on him finding fitness, then they're in serious trouble. A forward was signed in the January window, namely João Pedro, but the 18-year-old Brazilian is very much one for the long haul. In the here and now, Watford needs someone who can chip in along with Troy Deeney, who won't be around forever. West Ham, central midfield. I could just as easily have said right back here, where West Ham have had lack of depth, compounded by an injury crisis this season, but I think their problems in central midfield are just as serious. The Hammers obviously have a very good defensive midfielder in Declan Rice, who they'll be desperate to hang on to, but in front of him, there are some real problems. Mark Noble and Pablo Fornals have played more games than anyone else in central midfield for West Ham this season, whilst Robert Snodgrass has sometimes been played through the middle, along with Carlos Sanchez, Jack Wilshere and Thomas Souček. If West Ham could keep Jack Wilshere fit, that would do an awful lot to alleviate some of their midfield problems, but that's a bit like saying, if Barcelona could clone 11 Lionel Messis, they'd never lose another game. It may be true, but rather fanciful. As has long been the case, West Ham have the makings of a good team, but they are far from the finished article. Wolves. Centre-back. The Wolves starting 11 is a strong one, but Nuno Espirito Santo's side would benefit from added depth across the park, especially with the large number of fixtures they've had to contend with this season and may well have to again next season. In terms of a specific position, I'd say Wolves would be well advised to add a quality centre-back. Wolves tend to play with a back three, and when they do, Connor Cody looks excellent. The Englishman is less suited to playing in a flat back four, but that's only a problem should Wolves have a change of shape. Nuno Espirito Santo's other centre-back options are Willy Boly, who has missed much of this season through injury, Ryan Bennett, who has been on loan at Molineux from Leicester City, and young Max Kilman, who has only played a few games this season. I'd expect Wolves to once again be on the lookout for quality arrivals in the summer, including a backup for Raul Jimenez, and perhaps a quality number 10, but top of my list would be a new centre-back. That's it for today's video. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope you're all still well and safe. Please do take care. Give us a like if you enjoyed the video, and obviously make sure you are subscribed and have notifications turned on for the one and only HITC Sevens.